15, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was an honors student and a varsity track athlete, and I truly believed that if I did the right thing and worked hard, that I'd be able to determine exactly how my future turned out. Then the bump on my leg that my coaches thought was a running injury began to grow, and my mom made a doctor's appointment just to be on the safe side. As I sat on the exam table, the doctor walked in the room and he put my x-rays up on the screen. And he asked me what was wrong. It was that obvious. Even I could see the cloud of cells beginning to cluster around my bones. And he told me he was 99.9% sure that I had a sarcoma. And on that day, I became a cancer patient. I lost my hair, and unable to attend classes or compete, I lost major aspects of my identity. But my family and friends and community rallied around me, and I vowed not to disappoint them. I decided to attack my situation with positivity. And being the good student that I was, I vowed to learn everything I could from my experiences. And so I covered my bald head with sparkly body glitter and fake tattoos. Days in the oncology ward were long and lonely and painful. I lost control of my body as they stuck IV needles into my chest and into my wrists. I was so nauseous that even eating became difficult, and the chemotherapy left me so drained and weak that I sometimes needed my parents' help to shower or get dressed. But I still had the power to wear leopard print pajama pants and crazy rainbow toe socks, and so I did. Even on the day that I found out that I needed an amputation of my lower right leg, I felt a strange sense of calm. I remember sitting in the back of the car outside the surgeon's office, waiting for my mom to stop crying enough so that she'd be able to drive us home. And I looked out the window at the tree branches and I thought, this is not a mistake. I am becoming the exact person that I need to be. And on the day of the surgery, I put a pile of my clothes and jewelry onto my parents' lap, and wearing a hospital gown, I turned and walked down the hallway to the operating room, knowing it was the last time I would stand on my own 2 feet. When my treatments were complete and after I had learned to walk on a prosthetic leg, people asked me to come and talk about my positive outlook. At 18, I spoke to church groups and at Relay for Life events. But then the cancer came back, this time in my lungs. And I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed by my body, by the doctors, and by God. Because hadn't I already done my job of being the inspirational chemo kid? Hadn't I already learned everything there was to learn in the children's oncology ward? I went in to have the surgery to have the tumor removed from my lungs, and I returned to class as quickly as possible. But this time I stopped speaking about my experiences, and I began to wear long pants to cover my prosthetic leg, and I began to fight to be normal. In college, I did everything I could to make up for lost time. I wanted to be known as an actor and a writer and an excellent student before being known as the sick girl. But the cancer kept coming back. And I scheduled surgeries during vacations so that I didn't have to tell anybody at school. And against doctor recommendations, I boarded a plane to London to study abroad a few weeks after recovering from major surgery. I told myself that I wasn't going to let my disability or my disease define my experiences. And the cancer became more aggressive. And at 23, I needed another 9 months of chemotherapy. And this time I was mad. And I argued with God, and I wanted to know what good could possibly come from me having the same horrible experiences over and over again. I asked for any challenge, anything that didn't put me back into the oncology ward. And I went in to have the chemotherapy started, and I had to almost die twice before I finally asked the doctor what the side effects of my treatment were. And he listed them off, including heart defect, hearing loss, infertility. And then he paused and said, and leukemia. It took hearing that my treatments might give me a secondary form of cancer for me to wake up to the reality of my situation. For years, I had been closing my eyes and just wishing to get out of the hospital. I told myself, Danielle, you can be happy and your real life begins when this is all over. I had been living for an imaginary future and closing my eyes to the present moment. I quit my chemotherapy treatments and I radically altered my diet. After extensive research, I became a vegan and I began to practice yoga, even though I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to do any of the poses. On that first day, in that first class, as I rolled out my mat, I was sure the teacher was going to come around and ask me to leave, because really, what business does an amputee have doing in a yoga class? And I began to ask myself the difficult questions about who I really am. I had been for 10 years like a person trying to row back upstream to that vision of what I thought my life should look like. And all of that fighting had left me frustrated, depressed, disappointed, and like I was constantly missing the mark. Around this time, I began to remember Janet. Janet and I had been roommates in the children's oncology ward. And around the same time that I had gotten my amputation, the doctor said that she needed one as well. But whereas mine cut through my knee, hers was going to cut all the way up into her hip. And her parents refused. And my mom went to talk to them, to tell them that this is something that we could go through together. And they looked at my mom and they told her, no one will ever want to marry our daughter if she is disabled, if she is so broken. They truly couldn't imagine a future in which Janet was both lovable and an amputee. On the day that I thought was my last day in the children's oncology ward, as I was finishing up my final treatments, the nurses came in to let me know that down the hall Janet was dying. And pulling my IV pole behind me, I went to say goodbye to her one last time. The girl in the bed was unrecognizable and could not speak. And her family stood around the room helplessly as I walked to her bedside and touched her hand. That night, as I walked out of the hospital and I pulled off my medical ID bracelet, I tried to feel free. Years later, as I remember Janet, I know that trying to be normal can kill you, sometimes slowly. And I am letting go. I am letting go of that vision of what I thought my life should look like. And I am letting go of trying to prove anything to anyone. I am letting go of trying to pass for normal. And I am letting go of trying to cover all the things that I used to think were my faults and shortcomings. People often tell me that I'm such an inspiration because of all the things I've overcome. But I haven't overcome anything. I'm still an amputee. I still have to go into the hospital to get scans to see if the cancer has returned. The only thing that has changed is that I have stopped believing that my life has to look a certain way in order for me to be happy, or that I have to look a certain way in order to be worthy. So if you are sitting here today and you are waiting for the right circumstances to align, for that right boyfriend or girlfriend to come along, for that acceptance letter from the right school, to find the right job, or for that right number to finally be in your bank account, before you can be happy, then I can tell you, you are going to be disappointed, because you are already enough, and you will never be less or more than you are in this moment. And happiness cannot come from the external situations in your life, because they are always changing. and storms are coming for you if you aren't already in the midst of one now. So does this mean that you should just give up? Of course not. I only found healing when I took radical responsibility for my present moment. And this is why I love yoga so much, because yoga teaches us that even though every muscle in our body is trembling and sweat is dripping on the mat, we can still cultivate a clear mind and a rhythmic breath. We can find inner peace even when everything else seems to be in chaos. And we must first root down into a firm foundation before we can reach our hands to the sky. A friend of mine recently explained this paradox of vision and surrender to me when he said, "Danielle, of course you are the captain of your own ship. But a good captain doesn't spend all day staring at the horizon and plowing straight forward no matter what. A good captain has to be aware of the waters around her. And a good captain has to be willing to change direction to reach her destination. So be willing to do the work daily, knowing full well that the waters may take you in unexpected directions."